This show is dedicated to helping you strengthen your family tree and live financially free. Welcome to the Marriage, Kids, and Money podcast, everybody. This is Andy Hill, and today we're talking about FIRE. Financial independence, retire early. Yeah, this is a movement that's getting a lot of buzz lately, especially with millennials. Our guests today, Kristy Shen and Bryce Leung, are leaders in the millennial revolution for FIRE. Kristy and Bryce are Canada's youngest retirees. They used to live in one of the most expensive cities in Canada, but instead of drowning in debt, they rejected homeownership, and what resulted was a 7-figure portfolio, which has allowed them to retire in their 30s and travel the world. Their story has been featured in the New York Times, Forbes, Huffington Post, amongst many other publications, and they've written a book on FIRE for Penguin Random House, and it's out this month. Welcome to the show, Kristy and Bryce.
Hello, and thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So, I talked about traveling the world. Can I ask where you are right now?
We are in Portugal.
Wow. Yep. Very cool.
We spent the entire year in Europe this year, and we're just coming up to the end of it. After this, we're going to be, in a few days, we're going to be flying to Milan in Italy, and then after that, we're going to Bangkok in Thailand. So it's part of our whole chase the sun, and I never want to see a snowflake again ever in my life.
Yeah, we're giant wimps who can't tolerate any cold weather anymore. So
I
losing our Canadianness.
I have the same tolerance. I love that. I love that idea. Very cool. So let's talk about what you guys did before you have this travel and chase the sun lifestyle. Did you guys both work 9 to 5 before reaching FI?
Yeah, so we were both computer engineers, living in one of the most expensive places in Toronto, doing what everyone else was doing, which is, get a job, work until you're 65, get a mortgage, that whole adulting path that, all millennials are supposed to follow. So our jobs, his job was actually not bad. My job was pretty stressful. And I think it was because of me watching my coworkers get super stressed out to the point where one of them actually had major health issues and almost collapsed and died at his desk, that I just had this wake-up call that I was like, you know what? Maybe the path that our parents have written for us all these years doesn't make sense anymore. Maybe that was perfect advice for back in 1980s, when interest rates were normal and housing was affordable and jobs were actually stable. So I decided, you know what? I think we need to do something else. Maybe these rules don't really make any sense anymore.
So you started to write your own.
Yes,
exactly,
pretty much. Yeah.
So that's what kind of inspired you, not only your situation, but also looking at some of your coworkers. Working yourself into a health issue is, that's just so sad to see. And I understand it wasn't just that. There were also other people in your life that were kind of influencing some of that FIRE as well. people that you worked with. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. The really scary thing is the coworker that almost died at his desk. He basically had to get surgery, emergency surgery, and then he basically took a week off and then came back to work like it was nothing.
Yeah,
that was really scary. That was like, oh my God, what is going on?
When we asked him about that, he said he couldn't afford to stop working even for an instant, and because the mortgage payments would eat him alive, and then he would lose everything. So that's kind of when I realized that that people really don't know what the heck they're doing with money. There was some statistic that I read. It was part of this documentary that we're in. They said something like 40-50% of Americans are one paycheck away from financial ruin. And for the longest time, I didn't believe that until this earlier this year when there was that federal government shutdown.
Right.
That went for 35 days, and then I'm watching it with some, just kind of oh, that's interesting. Something about a wall. I didn't really follow the politics of it. But what was the most interesting to me about that is that the federal workers that were getting laid off, they were at food banks 2 weeks into the shutdown because they were just out of food. And I was just kind of wow, people are really living paycheck to paycheck. And I'm just kind of that statistic really is true. One missed paycheck, just financial ruin. And what I realized from that was that mortgages is the biggest reason for that to happen, because it creates this debt for the next 25 years that's tied to your paycheck, and you can't ever miss a paycheck or your entire life falls apart.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we started to go, you know what? Maybe a house is not the best solution.
So was that after you guys saw some of these things and you were inspired, that it was almost like you had PTSD seeing some of your coworkers go through some of that thing. So your PTSD at least led into FIRE, which is good. But so what changes did you guys make sort of immediately in order to go towards FIRE?
Well, we decided that we weren't going to put the money towards a house, and we were going to stop going to open houses, which were just a nightmare in of itself, because there were some open houses in which as soon as we walked through the door, the real estate agent would look at us and be like, you can afford this? Look at how young you are. Like, how much money could you possibly have? You could just tell they did not want to even show you the house. And then on top of that, anytime you try to make an offer, it's, bidding war immediately ensues. So the first thing we did was, okay, let's stop. We're not going to go to any more open houses. We're not going to put the money towards a down payment because it's just going to, we're just going to get into more debt. And then my work is getting more stressful. It doesn't make any sense. So we decided to learn how to invest. So that was the first step towards FIRE. How do we make this money generate passive income so that we don't ever have to work again, rather than constantly feed a house and prevent us from ever being free and tied to our jobs forever?
Because after that moment, we at the time we had been saving up money for a while. We were really good at saving money because we kept living frugally for the purposes of
house,
saving up the house. Like saving up money for the down payment, and the down payment fund had gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger at that point. To the point of around 2012, it was worth about $500,000.
Wow!
And at that point, we were getting ready to buy a house, or we had been trying to. But even then, with that amount of money, it would still result in another $500,000 of debt, because the damn house would have cost $1 million or more. So at that point, we started learning how the math works for FIRE, and with $500,000, and given how much we were spending just living in Toronto, which was about $40,000, as per the 4% rule, we needed $1 million to retire. So running the math through, I realized if we bought a house, we'd be paying that debt off for another 5 or 10 years. Or we could be retired in 3. And at that point, it was like, I think I'd much rather do this. Yep. So we pulled the trigger, and I didn't realize this at the time, but we had become. So when we gave our notice, we were still 31, and when we left, we later then realized that we had become like the youngest people in Canada to have retired, and it was all because we didn't buy a house. And that became really, really that went crazy in the media, because the idea of that home ownership is what adults do, and home ownership is the best way to build wealth. Our experience flew directly in the face of all of that, and it wasn't theoretical. It was just like, no, I didn't buy a house, and now I'm a millionaire. And then people kind of went, what? So that's kind of where the media stuff and the blog kind of exploded from.
Well, let me ask some specifics then, because you said you built that $500,000 in savings. Where were you putting that money when you were building that up? Was that just in a regular savings account? Were you already putting that in like a taxable brokerage, and then you realized the potential of it? Where was that money sitting?
The short answer is it was mostly in a savings account for most of the time. I guess the longer answer is like around 2008 and 2007. I didn't know that we were going to be buying a house, so I started investing somewhat in the stock market using crappy mutual funds and like this kind of stuff right into 2008. So that caused that huge crash. So when we got out of that, we moved all the rest of that money into cash in preparation to buy a house. Then in 2012, when we decided to do the FIRE thing, we then shifted the money back towards investing, but this time we did it properly using, an index portfolio with ETFs and all the kind of stuff that we advocate on the site now.
So because we were actually putting that money in a savings account and trying to work towards a house, we actually missed out on 3 years of the bull market run. And it didn't matter. And we still were able to retire within 10 years, right, as a result of not buying a house, which just goes to show that the goal of sinking everything into debt really, really hurts you. And even when you make a mistake of not being in the stock market, you can still get out of it and retire early. despite the mistake that we made.
Absolutely. You guys jumped in at a good time to get back in and take advantage of that growth. So tell me, just to help everybody out, because we all hear index funds, ETFs, can you tell us specifically what you guys did when you made that switch over to investing and saving for FIRE? What is your philosophy? You guys like index funds? Talk about that a little bit more. Tell everybody what that means.
Sure. So when we realized that we were going to go back into investing, we calculated and realized we were about 3 years away from hitting our target. So what happened there was we created a index portfolio that's about 60% equity, 40% fixed income. It's still pretty much the portfolio that we use today. And for us in Canada, we then took the equity portion of it and just split it equally between Canada, US, and the international indexes. For Americans, you would probably want to go US and the international indexes because there's no reason for Americans to invest in Canada. And then the rest of it, and then the rest of it is put into bonds and fixed income instruments just to reduce the volatility and kind of smooth out the ride. And that's kind of where we did it. That's kind of what we did. It really isn't anything complicated, and I teach people how to do this on our site. I ran this whole thing for like a year called the Investment Workshop, where I taught people how to like actually build a portfolio from scratch and exactly what to buy and exactly how to build a portfolio and exactly how to like rebalance and all this kind of stuff. And it really isn't that hard, but it's not obvious to a lot of people because we aren't taught any of this kind of stuff in school.
So one of the things that helped me a lot, because I came from a background where, I grew up in rural China, I didn't actually grow up in Canada. So I always had that scarcity mindset, right? Where initially I was attracted to housing because the stock market was terrifying to someone who has that background. So the only thing that really got me out of that terrified mindset was the fact that we were investing in index funds. So I realized that with index funds, your portfolio cannot go to zero because you're buying the entire market. You're not betting on individual stocks, and you're not, being had by some banker who's telling you, yeah, you're getting these crazy 20% returns. So being like very pragmatic about it and understanding how indexing works was actually really helpful in getting that mindset away from housing and towards investing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So at what point did you guys say, all right, we're good? You said 31 years old, but at what amount of money did you get to where you're saying, all right, we're good, we're going to be done with this 9-to-5 thing?
So one of the major kind of insights about the FIRE movement is that your retirement date is not based on your age, but it's based on how much money you have. So based on retirement research, the traditional retirement planners have this thing called the 4% rule. And how it works is that it states however much money you have, you can afford to safely withdraw and spend 4% of it each year and adjust it for inflation each year. And statistically, over a long enough time, like 30 years or something like that, you have a 95% chance of not running out of money. So that's the technical definition, and you can do things to make it like 100% success rate if you want, which is what we ended up doing, a little bit of tweaks. But as a guideline, if you take how much money you spend and you multiply it by 25, which is the same as dividing by 4%, that's how much your target portfolio needs to be before you are safe to retire. So for us, we were spending about $40,000, and $40,000 times 25 is about $1 million. Actually, it's not about $1 million; it's $1 million. So once we hit that target, at that point we kind of went, okay, I think we're done, and then we started trying to figure out, okay, how do we wind down our careers and pack up all of our boxes and all that kind of stuff. That stuff took a few more months after that, but at that point when we hit the target, that's when we kind of mentally made the decision to say, okay, career number one is now officially over. Now let's figure out what the next step is, kind of thing.
I love it. And when did you guys come together in this whole journey? Have you been dating from the beginning and then married later on? How did that all work?
We actually met and started dating in a computer lab. So I like to joke that it was total nerd love, level 1000.
We were lab partners.
Yeah, in the university that we went to, which is the University of Waterloo, supposedly the MIT of Canada, but that's debatable. And so basically when we met, we came from pretty different backgrounds in terms of how we think about money. So my mindset with money is really kind of like more of the hoarding mindset, which is more the scarcity mindset. And I think Bryce was more like a normal, non-crazy person. He was more like a regular person that was like more comfortable with, investing and taking risks.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it normal or not normal, but Kristy's background, she alluded earlier that she grew up in rural China, but it wasn't just rural China, it was like abject poverty in rural China. As part of writing the book, we kind of explore how her experience growing up affected how she deals with money. And we realized, looking at census data and historical income numbers from that area, that her entire family was living on about 44 U.S. cents a day. That's how little that they had. And when you are, her parents still have this things. Remember when we shelled out 20 cents for these dumplings? That's the level of poverty that they were dealing with. So when you grow up in that, you very, very naturally kind of want to. Money becomes a very, very important part of your life, and it's not just about you become very good at counting it, saving it, knowing how much to spend on things. I still don't know how much a pound of apples is supposed to cost, but she does, right? So she goes into a supermarket and she's like, that's 10 cents more than it should be. I have no idea. I'm like, that's an apple, because I didn't have that kind of thing growing up. But on the other hand, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because while she is very, very, very good at saving money, like making sure that you get the best deal on everything that you like on bananas and whatever, and then translating that into savings. On the other hand, her mindset is it's very hard for her to invest in anything that could be volatile. So the idea of having the stock market drop, during 2008 when we first started investing, I would literally put in $1,000 into the stock market, and the next day there would be like 1,000-point drop on the Dow, and then my holdings would be down by $1,000. So it was just kind of like, and now it's gone, right? So that mindset is something that I'm a lot more comfortable with, because I know how all the business side of it works, and I know how the investment side of it works, and I know that it'll never go to zero and it'll always come back up. But for her, it was very difficult for her to say, put money into this thing that could cost you money. And so you really required the two sets of skills in order to make it to where we are. Her ability to hoard and save money, and then my ability to kind of be comfortable with the risk it takes to invest in the stock market.
That sounds like index funds where you're happy medium then.
Yeah. No stock picking for us or anything like that. It's because index funds is a way to control risk, right? When you bet on individual stocks, it is absolutely possible for your portfolio to plummet to zero if a bunch of those companies go bankrupt. You never know. Like the companies that are in the Dow right now, there's literally none of them that are the same companies in the Dow from 30 years ago. So companies die and they get reborn, and then competitors come and snap them up all the time. So when you are investing in individual stocks, you have to actually be on top of that. You have to realize, BlackBerry is going down and Apple's going up, so you have to get out of one position and get into the other position and all that kind of stuff. With index funds, it's just all done for you, because as companies drop in value, they get kind of their market cap goes down, and as a result, they become weighted less and less and less in the index. So indexes that are market cap weighted, they naturally kind of rebalance for you. As companies go down, they own less of it. As companies go up, they own more of it. So, I mean, it's almost like an auto rebalancing thing that happens with index funds. And as a result, you don't have to chase trends, and you don't have to do these things. And also, you can't possibly go down to zero, because the only way for an index to go down to zero is for every company in the United States to go down to zero, which means the Reds have invaded or the aliens are coming, and it doesn't really matter what your portfolio is at that point, because there's zombies at the gate.
Right.
That
that's
over.
The level.
We're in the Hunger Games,
right,
so
exactly.
just pick up a hatchet and go.
Yeah, in that situation, the best defense is a samurai sword or a baseball bat named Lucille.
That's right. That's right. Bone up on your Walking Dead if that happens, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, cool. So let's talk about the rent versus buy scenario, because this is super interesting to me, and it's obviously a big pinnacle to your success. You guys just decided to, hey, we're not going to spend $1 million on a place to live that we have to keep funding over and over again and then repair everything. So overall, why Let me ask you this question, because you said you've lost a few friends with this opinion, but
oh yeah,
why did you guys feel so adamant about it at the time? What was your point where you said this is just not going to work out? Was it when you weren't able to develop enough cash to do it? What about living in a different part of the world and buying a more reasonable place to live? What were your overall thoughts on just being something that's you're never going to do?
Well, one was actually doing the math and figuring out that a lot of the times when you actually look at bank calculators online, they actually only show you the mortgage. They don't really show you all the additional costs that come with it, which is the insurance and the property tax and the maintenance. And all of that could add 50% of your cost on top of what you're already paying for the mortgage. And we actually saw evidence of this a lot with our friends, right? We have friends who brag about, oh my God, my house has gone up and has doubled, it's gone up 50%. And then the next day you talk to them and they're just complaining about work and complaining about everything that they have to fix around the house, how much money is going into it. If you ask them at all how much the maintenance costs, they will jump down your throat. And it's just like, you're not happy. Your house is going up and you're still miserable. Why is that? And when you actually peel back the curtain, it's because even if it's gone up, they have to live in the house and they're not willing to downsize because they're already a homeowner. They're not going to change back to becoming a renter. They're not going to downgrade the house because they've already lived in that house. They've gotten used to it. There's emotional attachment to the house. So they can't get the money back out. And they're still their boss's bitch and nothing has changed. So we do the math and then we look at the evidence around us. And then we decided, you know what? Everybody's just playing a game of FOMO, like fear of missing out, because it's like a Ponzi scheme, right? If I talk about my portfolio and I'm doing a 60-40 split and you're doing a 90-10, I'm not going to have an argument about, oh yeah, you need to be using my allocation, or somebody else is not investing in the stock market. I'm not going to scream at them to invest in the stock market. I don't care, because my success is not dependent on you investing in the market. But what we saw with the housing market was everybody was just pushing you and saying you have to buy a house, because they know if the housing market collapses, they're in big trouble. So it's almost like this, Ponzi scheme to get you in and buying the house so that they can keep their home values up. And so that mentality, we did not want to be part of that, right? Now, that's not to say every single home purchase is wrong. I mean, we have friends who live in inexpensive places in the US and home ownership makes perfect sense for them. And, kudos to them. They did the math and it works perfectly fine for them. But for us, it just made no sense whatsoever. Where we lived made no sense. Everybody else was house horny and they really, really wanted you to buy into this Ponzi scheme. And I did not want to be part of it.
Well, let's talk.
That's how you lose friends, right?
Go ahead, Bryce. Sorry.
I mean, people in the media keep saying, "Oh, we're anti-houses." We're not actually anti-house. We're anti-debt. I mean, the problem with if you can buy a house with cash and it costs $150,000, yeah, go for it.
Sure, why not?
Right? Because it's not going to take up a big part of your net worth. It's not going to put you into massive amounts of debt. And I like to I don't like debt at all. There's this whole thing of there's good debt and bad debt, and I was like, I don't think there really is any good debt because debt traps you, right? So if people are able to do it without going into debt, fine, all the more power to them. But when you're in a high cost city and you end up, and the only way to own this asset is to sell off the rest of your life for 25 years in a situation in which, us millennials, we don't have job security the last 25 years. So why in the world would we ever do that? But it's old thinking. And that's kind of why we started doing this whole revolution thing, because it's just kind of the old rules don't work anymore because the old situation doesn't exist. We don't have jobs that are that stable. The media keeps yelling at us, being like, "Oh, millennials are flighty and they keep changing jobs." We don't do that because we want to. We have to do that because we're awkward, because the jobs aren't stable anymore.
There's no pension anymore, right?
There's no pension. We live in a world in which we could do great on a project. The boss comes and says, "Great job, everyone. It went in. You're all fired." Everyone,
I saw that.
All the jobs are going to India.
I saw that exact scenario. I've seen it with my own eyes.
So it's just kind of we're not And then we have to go find a new job, and add to this the stress of having to pay off a mortgage. It's just not. It doesn't work.
Absolutely.
And a house, a large part of your money in your house, doesn't help you retire. That's what we realized afterwards. That if you have $1 million portfolio versus $1 million house, one helps you retire, the other one doesn't, because you can't spend a shingle off of your house to pay for your living expenses. But you can do that with a portfolio. So it's a very, very different situation when you have all your money is stuck in a dead asset like real estate versus a liquid asset like a portfolio. One helps you become free. The other one just gets trapped.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's talk to those people who already have the mortgage. They've already committed.
Yeah.
What do you think they should do? Should they pay it off or should they invest? What do you think the best thing is?
I would say for people who are, really uncomfortable with debt, there's some people that it doesn't matter. They don't want to have any debt hanging over their heads. They want to just buy the house outright in order to have, be able to sleep at night, not have to worry about it. And that's perfectly fine. And for people who are more mathematically inclined and they're thinking, okay, if the market is going to return me, let's say 6% after inflation, and my mortgage is only 3%, then maybe it makes sense for me to, not pay off the mortgage and invest the money in the stock market. So it depends on the personality, right? So for someone who is really, really uncomfortable with debt, like I would not recommend them invest in the stock market and not pay off their mortgage, even if their mortgage rate is really low, because, you want, like, that is going to affect your health to have to worry about the stock market being volatile, but at the same time, you have a mortgage hanging over your head. So I think if you're more comfortable with debt, you could try to use that rule of thumb. I mean, it doesn't work for every single person, but like an overall rule of thumb is if your mortgage rate is, let's say, below 4%, then maybe you can actually beat the returns in the market and then not keep a mortgage while investing in the stock market. But it really varies from person to person.
And especially for you guys, since your mortgage interest rate is tax deductible. In Canada, it's not, or rather, it's not by default. You have to do this trickery in order to make it tax deductible. But for you guys, it's by default. So, well, what are your mortgage rates now? Like if you were to walk in and get a 30-year,
probably 5%. They've gone up a little bit.
5.
Yeah,
gone up. Okay.
Yeah, for a 30. Yeah.
I was remembering things at 2% and
Oh yeah, no,
wow,
not just. I think we got our house in 2013, and we were able to get a 15-year 3% on a 15-year. So 3%. That was great.
Yeah, that's pretty decent.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
But I was like y'all, and I did not want to have any debt, so we paid ours off because we just didn't want to have it. I don't like owing people money. Yeah. It makes me feel trapped. So
right. And then sometimes that state of mind, it really is worth it, right? Not being the bank's bitch, not having to worry about it at nighttime. It really makes it a big difference.
There's the question that you have, which is pay off the debt, pay off or not pay off the debt. I have a rule of thumb, which is nobody ever got poor by paying off their debt too fast, right? I mean, you can't go wrong with paying off debt too badly, but you can go wrong by holding too much debt and screwing up, right? Yeah. So if you're not certain, pay it off more. But if you're more comfortable with it, mathematically below 4%, just it's okay to invest that. But above that, I'd still pay it off.
Well, let's talk about building the wealth. Obviously, you guys did that a lot with investing in a taxable brokerage account. You talked a lot about a lot of those details. Thank you for sharing those. What do you guys think about? I know we're talking about houses right now. What do you think about building your wealth through rental properties or different types of formats like that, commercial properties, anything like that? What do you think? Do you prefer the investing side as opposed to the rental property side?
Oh yeah, we invest through real estate, just not through building it directly. We use one of the things that you can invest in is REITs or real estate investment trusts, and it's just there's indexes for REITs as well. XRE is one of the ones that we use, and it ends up owning commercial property, owning apartment buildings, nursing homes, then paying you a dividend of 4 or 5% of the rents. So yeah, you can still do that without owning actual houses. I would say though that to anybody who's looking to build their real estate, build their wealth with commercial real estate or investment properties, it's a lot more complicated than you think it is, because real estate is weird in that investing in the stock market feels complicated, but actually isn't, while investing in real estate feels safe, but actually is a lot more complicated than you think of, because there are so many things that can go wrong with an investment property that are things that just don't happen in the stock market, mold, maintenance issues that are randomly hitting you, a bad tenant, vacancies, property tax increases, a bloody hurricane coming in and blowing your house away, insurance costs. There's a lot of stuff in there, and we don't say real estate is a bad investment. It's just I do know people that are successful investing in a rental real estates. But it's far more common for people who think that they're good at it and then actually aren't. Like they're like those are the people that, oh yeah, I own a bunch of buildings, and it's just kind of like, what's your cash flow? Like, what do you like? How much rent are you collecting? And they're just like, I don't know. What are your costs? I don't know. Are you like cash flow positive, negative? They're like, I don't know. I'm just like, so there's a lot of I'm just there's a lot of unsophisticated real estate investors out there, but it can be done. It can be done. With real estate, there's a lot more to that than people think there are. We don't actually even do it either. Like for all of our investing expertise and this kind of stuff, we don't touch real estate because it's even beyond our ability to go in and like do.
I think part of it is also we like things to be passive. Like I don't actually want to pick up a hammer. I don't like changing light bulbs, and I don't like having to evict people. So it really depends on kind of your personality too. Like some people really love that stuff. Like they love tearing down walls. And kudos to you if you love that. That might be the perfect path for you, right? So I think everybody has to pick their own path. Real estate investing is a perfectly valid path to fire. Just be aware from us talking to other real estate investors that it is a lot of work and you have to do the math and do the homework. It's not a magic pill.
And it's not passive. It's kind of another job.
Yeah. You have to put in the work.
I like your philosophy of less things to worry about and more income. So that makes a lot of sense. So let's talk about what your lives look like now. You guys retired at 31 and you're young, you're in your 30s, you're traveling. What does this freedom life look for you? Give us a walk through your typical day or what's going on in your life right now.
Yeah, I mean, like after we left, we wanted to, for various, timing related reasons, we needed to stay at work for like 6 months in order, because my boss was going on a paternity leave, so I had to cover him and this kind of stuff. So as a result, we saved up more money than we thought that we would need. So after we quit, we said, okay, how's about this? We never did that gap year thing. That annoying thing that millennials do, where they go around and backpack across Europe and find themselves. And it's like, we want that. We didn't do that. We never got a chance to do. We never got a chance to do that after school. We just went right to work. So we're like, let's do that annoying backpack thing.
Let's find ourselves.
Let's go find ourselves in Italy or whatever.
I didn't actually tell my coworkers when I was leaving that we were retiring. I just told them that I'm going to go find myself. And they're like, oh, yeah, that sounds valid.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, totally typical of millennials.
We're all like, morons. Anyway, so then we did it. And we spent a year backpacking across Europe, Southeast Asia, Japan, and then like all over the States. It was a lot of fun. And then at the end of the year, we wrapped back around and flew back to Canada. And that's the point where we kind of added up all the money that we spent during that gap year and then realized it was $40,000. Like it cost a lot. And that's when we kind of realized it costs a lot less to travel the world than to just stay in one place in a high cost city, because when you travel like that, you live like a local. You don't stay in hotels and you don't stay in you don't take cruise ships. You grab a rental. You cook your own food and you kind of live like you normally would, just in a different location. And that's the point where we kind of realized, if we can travel the world on the same amount of money that we were planning on retiring anyway, we could just do this forever. And then we were like, fuck it, So, and then we booked a ticket to Japan, and then we've been doing it ever since. So we've been traveling ever since then, and it's just been amazing. I mean, like, again, this year we spent like an entire year in Europe because there was a visa that we could get that allowed us to stay here for a year. And then, but after that, we're just going to be every month we kind of go, all right, where do we want to go next? Like, let's go to Italy, let's go to France, let's go to like all these kind of places. That's kind of our life now, which is pretty awesome.
That sounds incredible. Yeah. That sounds incredible. So obviously you guys have hit this fire limit, and you were able to spend your $40,000 per year with it living in perpetuity. So what kind of personal goals or financial goals do you guys have right now that are exciting you for the next 70 years of your life?
So one of the things that's kind of been mind-blowing about this lifestyle is the exact opposite of the cubicle lifestyle we had before, where everything was very fixed. You had to get to work at a certain time. I had to work a lot of weekends. Whereas now we have all the freedom in the world, and every day is different. So we could spend a day working on passion projects or volunteering. We could spend a day, actually doing touristy stuff and sightseeing. So the fact that your day is different every day makes every day feel very long. So like the first year that we actually retired, it felt like it was 10 years. Like seriously, every single day just stretched out. And then I remember when I was working that a day would just go by, and then a year would go by, and then 5 years would go by. And I'm like, where is my life going? Why is it going so fast? But with travel, because every single moment is different, your mind actually like clicks awake and it starts tracking all the different memories that you're making. And when you're like, because we're working on creative projects like writing a book, writing a blog, volunteering for a nonprofit, those experiences add up to the point where you are very much aware of what is happening in your life. Whereas before I was just autopilot. I was really just like, get through the day, get these assignments done. Don't even think about what I'm going to do next because I don't have time. So it really has changed the way we view life and the way we view, basically what's the meaning of life and what does freedom mean, and all these big questions that I never really had time to ask. Like, what is the meaning of life? Why are we here? What is our purpose, and what is it that we want to work on? What is it that we want to learn? Who are the people we want to meet? So it really is kind of opens up your mind to all these big questions now that you don't really have to think about where your next paycheck is going to come from.
And in terms of answering your original question, like what are we planning on doing with all this kind of time? Well, you know what? We've been teaching people how to do this. I mean, like the whole, like, we become leaders in the FIRE community because I think people are really excited about the lifestyle that we lead, and this whole retire early and then travel the world thing is really appealing to a lot of people. And we teach people how to do that because it's not just about like how to invest. It's also about like the technical details about like how to like what happens. What do you do with health insurance? How do you withdraw from your portfolio every year? How do you change your investment strategy after you retire? And what do you do if there's a stock market downturn? So there's those kinds of questions and those kinds of things that we're trying to teach people how to do. That's why we wrote the book. That's why I wrote the blog. So that's kind of what we've been devoting ourselves to, and we're probably going to be doing that for a while because the whole FIRE space, it just seems to be like, as you've noticed, kind of blowing up a little bit. Mm-hmm. The FIRE idea is actually, I think it was first kind of coined by Vicki Robin back in Your Money, Your Life, and that was like 20-ish years ago, right? Mm-hmm. And it, for whatever reason, there is this explosion of interest in it, like now everyone kind of wants to know about it and how to do it and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, we're probably gonna be busy for the next little while.
That's great. Well, you're giving back. That's an incredible thing to do. So there's a parent listening right now that says, "This sounds great. I'd love to travel the world, but I've got little kids. How do I give them school? How do I do the things I'm supposed to do? Right? Get them in a good school district. How can I do that if I'm traveling the world?" Talk to us a little bit about that.
That is actually a really good question, because that's a question we asked ourselves when we actually decided to do this permanent, nomadicism kind of lifestyle. So we asked ourselves and we said, okay, well, if we decide to have kids, obviously we have to stop doing this and we have to settle down somewhere. What is that going to look like? And the funny thing is, as a result of traveling, we actually ended up meeting this woman and her son. So she was in Mexico at the time. She was in Tulum, and we were in the same Airbnb. And then I noticed that it wasn't the summer, and she had taken her son out during the school year and been traveling for a couple months. So I asked her, I was like, is that allowed? Like, how come it's not part of the summer and you still have your son with you for so long? And she's like, oh, I'm part of something called world schooling. And I'm like, what? This is a real thing? I thought that this is just something like, wow, this is amazing. Tell me more about it. So then we discovered that there's a Facebook community of over 40,000 people that are part of this new idea that you could use the world as your classroom to educate your children. This movement kind of started as a result of 2008, where a lot of families were worried about their financial security because of what happened in the stock market. They were worried about all the mortgage that they were paying on their house. So they decided to start traveling, and because they discovered that was actually cost reducing rather than cost increasing. So they started this whole community about how to educate kids on the road and using the world to teach their kids about currency conversion, teach them about history. Like, why learn about the Vietnam War in a classroom when you can just go to Vietnam and actually find out exactly what happened? And then a lot of their children can speak multiple different languages because they actually grew up with like speaking to locals in different areas. So we have been doing quite a bit of research, talking to the leaders of this community, and that's in the book. There's a lot of resources that we've been given, that this is not only a like community that's quite large and growing. They've actually have a lot of methods for teaching their kids, depending on how old their children are, depending on the type of education method that's appropriate for their child. Like, you can actually buy kits online. There is teachers that are online that are willing to work with you to provide a curriculum for your children. Some of them send them to correspondence schools or international schools while they're abroad and living like expats. So there's actually multiple different ways to educate your children. And so that's one of the paths that we would like to go down if we actually decide to have a child in the future.
And we do know there are some other F5 bloggers. Jeremy from Go Curry Crackers is an example, who is traveling the world, retired and with a young kid. So there's lots of actual options out there, and it's like it's kind of amazing when you think about like all these different kind of ways of living your life. One of the coolest things that we have discovered as we started traveling is you start meeting people who are living these like weird non-standard lives, and then you start going like, wow, I didn't even know that was possible. So like the world schooler woman had no idea what the fire movement was. The fire movement had no idea what the world schooler movement was. We had no idea, and that was literally the first contact either of our groups had ever had, whatever. So she's asking us about like, so how does this whole retire? Because like they are not concerned, or not they're not concerned about it, but their movement is just about the education stuff. It doesn't even talk about how to make money nomadically or anything like that. But FIRE is this whole like, now that you do this, you don't need to worry about money anymore. So when you combine those two ideas, obviously now you have this weird synergy thing going on, which is you don't have to work, you don't have to stop traveling, you can travel with your kids and educate them on the road, and it all just kind of works. So It's like, yeah, it's a really cool like worlds that we're still now learning about. So yeah,
I love that. I love it when fire and world schooling combine. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, thank you both so much for your time today. I know you're traveling abroad and living this lifestyle. I appreciate you guys taking time to speak with me today. Where can people find this new book and connect with you?
Okay, so our book is called Quit Like a Millionaire. It's being published by Penguin Random House. And so we will have the links to our book and information on our website at www.millennial-revolution.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys both so much for your time today, and enjoy your chasing of the sun.
Thank you so much for having us.